The dog runs into the field, barks twice at something the family cannot see, and is gone. It is the summer of 1996. A 480-acre cattle ranch sits in the Uintah Basin of northeastern Utah, ringed by red rock and sagebrush. The new owners have been on the property less than a week. The husband is standing near the corral when he sees 3 lights moving low over the pasture. The dog charges. The dog does not come back. The next morning, in a circle of flattened brush, he finds what he later describes as 3 patches of dried, blackened grass, each the size of a body, with the dog's tracks leading in and stopping. What happened in that pasture, and in the years that followed, would draw physicists, billionaires, and federal contractors to a single fence line in rural Utah. The family who bought the ranch in 1994 are known publicly as the Shermans. Terry Sherman is a cattleman. His wife Gwen grew up nearby. They have 2 children. They pay roughly $200,000 for the property, which sits along the Bottle Hollow Reservoir on the edge of the Ute tribal lands. The previous owners, according to later interviews, kept the doors deadbolted from the inside and refused to discuss why. Heavy chains were welded across the refrigerator and the cabinetry. The Shermans notice this, but do not dwell on it. They are buying grass and water rights, not folklore. The Uintah Basin in the mid-90s is a quiet place. Oil and gas pumps work the back roads. The nearest town, Roosevelt, has a population under 5,000. The Ute Reservation borders the ranch on 3 sides, and tribal members have stories about the land going back generations. Stories about a curse placed by the Navajo, about something walking the riverbanks, about why no one from the tribe will hunt that ground. Terry Sherman has heard some of these stories. He buys the ranch anyway. He plans to run prize Black Angus on it. For the first 18 months, nothing unusual happens. Then, in the spring of 1996, it begins. And it does not stop for 2 years. The first incident the family will later recount involves a wolf. Terry, Gwen, and the children are unloading the last of their belongings. A large canid walks calmly across the front yard and approaches one of their calves at the corral fence. Terry watches it clamp its jaws on the calf's snout. He fires a pistol at the animal at close range. The bullet appears to strike. The animal does not flinch. He fires again and again. According to his statements to the Deseret News reporter Zach Van Eyck in June, he empties the magazine. The animal turns, walks unhurriedly toward the pasture, and disappears into the brush. There is no blood trail. There is no body. Over the following months, the Shermans report that cattle begin to vanish. Not stolen, vanished. A bull is found wedged into the low fork of a cottonwood tree, dead, with no marks to suggest how it got there. Other animals are discovered in the pasture with what Terry describes as surgical excisions: an eye removed, an ear taken, the rectum cored out, and not a drop of blood on the ground. The cuts are clean. Coyotes do not touch the carcasses. Flies do not land. In one case, Terry says he tracks fresh hoof prints in mud that simply stop mid-stride, as though the animal stepped off the surface of the earth. And here is where the case begins to shift from agricultural horror into something stranger. The lights start. Glowing orbs, blue and orange, drifting over the pasture at the height of a man. Gwen reports a refrigerator-sized object hanging in the sky above the ridge, with what she describes as a doorway of light. Terry and his son report a voice speaking in a language they do not understand from a point in the air 10 feet above their heads, with no source visible. The family begins sleeping with the lights on. The children stop going to the barn after dark. The dog incident, the 3 dogs vaporized into circles of scorched grass, happens, by Terry's account, during this period. By the spring of '90s, Terry Sherman has had enough. He calls the local newspaper. Van Eyck's article runs on June 30th. The piece is careful and skeptical, but it includes everything: the mutilations, the lights, the disappearing animals, the voice. It is read, among others, by a Las Vegas real estate developer named Robert Bigelow. Bigelow has spent a fortune funding research into the paranormal. He has founded the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, to investigate unexplained phenomena with scientific rigor. He flies to Utah. He walks the property. In late 1996, he purchases the ranch from the Shermans for a reported $200,000 and installs a team of researchers, biochemists, veterinarians, former law enforcement, a retired Army colonel named John B. Alexander. The Shermans move away. The NIDS team moves in. What the NIDS investigators document over the next 8 years has never been fully released, and that fact is at the center of what makes this case so difficult to evaluate. According to the team's lead scientist, biochemist Colm Kelleher, and journalist George Knapp, who co-authored the 2005 book Hunt for the Skinwalker, the researchers witness more than 100 unexplained events. Cameras malfunction at the moment of an incident and resume working immediately after. A bull elk-sized creature is reported climbing out of what one observer calls a hole in the sky. Investigators describe seeing humanoid figures and feeling a sense of being watched so intense that armed men leave their posts. Equipment is sabotaged in ways that suggest intelligence. Wires cut on the inside of locked junction boxes, batteries drained on multiple devices simultaneously. And then there is the incident, recounted in the book and in later interviews, of a researcher who watches a black shape rise out of the ground near Homestead 2, the small structure at the center of the property. He describes it as a window or portal, briefly visible, and a 4-legged creature stepping through it before the opening closes. The team finds tracks. The tracks lead nowhere. NIDS quietly winds down its work on the ranch around 2004. In 2007, the Defense Intelligence Agency awards a contract to Bigelow Aerospace under a program called AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. Documents later released indicate that a significant portion of AAWSAP's fieldwork is conducted at the ranch. The federal government, on paper, was studying this property. In 2016, Bigelow sells the ranch to a Utah businessman who initially operates under a shell company and later identifies himself as Brandon Fugal. Fugal opens the gates to a television production crew. Since 2020, much of what happens on the ranch has been filmed. Drones fail at specific altitudes above a particular mesa. Radiation spikes register on calibrated equipment with no industrial source nearby. A camera operator is hospitalized after an incident near Homestead 2. The cattle, still grazing, still occasionally turning up dead in ways the local veterinarian cannot explain, continue to be the quiet center of it all. The theories divide roughly into 4 camps. The first is conventional: misidentification, exaggeration, hoax. Skeptics, including astronomer and longtime UFO debunker James McGaha, point out that the Uintah Basin is dense with natural gas infrastructure, military overflight corridors, and unusual atmospheric conditions that can produce strange lights. The mutilations, they argue, are consistent with normal predation and bloat. The problem with this theory is that it does not account for the volume and variety of reports, or for the testimony of trained investigators with no incentive to fabricate. The second theory is extraterrestrial: the lights, the craft, the missing time, the voice in the air, these fit the broader UFO pattern, and the ranch sits beneath what aviation researchers have called a known corridor of unexplained aerial activity. The undermining evidence is simple. In nearly 3 decades of observation, no physical artifact, no piece of hardware, no body has ever been produced. The third theory comes from the Ute themselves. The land, in tribal oral tradition, is cursed, a place where a skinwalker, a witch from Navajo belief, was sent and bound. The phenomena are not visitors. They are residents. Believers point to the consistency of the experiences across unrelated families. Skeptics point out that the skinwalker tradition belongs to the Navajo, not the Ute, and that the curse story may itself be a later overlay. The fourth theory, advanced by some of the physicists who have worked the site, is that the ranch sits over a geophysical anomaly, a place where electromagnetic conditions interact with human perception in ways not yet understood. It is the most scientifically modest theory. It is also the one that, so far, has produced the least testable evidence. 3 dogs ran into a field in the summer of '96 and did not come back. Hundreds of trained investigators have walked that same field since. The Defense Intelligence Agency has spent taxpayer money studying it. A television crew has filmed it for 5 seasons. And the central question, what is actually happening on those 480 acres, remains exactly where Terry Sherman left it when he packed his family and drove away. Something on that land responds to attention. Something on that land does not want to be measured. Whether it is geology, psychology, biology, or something we do not yet have a word for, no one who has stood at that fence line has been able to say. If you have a theory about what really happened, drop it in the comments. I read every one.